Jeremy Corbyn seems to be an acquired taste. Have we acquired a taste for him? Or has the combined masses or combined mass of the right-wing media actually turned us off him? Because he used to be very popular. This latest poll suggests that ain't necessarily so now. The Prime Minister would storm to a 34. Now, I wonder if this is because people have been inundated with negative publicity about Jeremy Corbyn ever since he poked his head above the parapet. I can remember we had the various leaders who were vying to become, or the various politicians who were vying to become the leader of the Labour Party in our studios. And each of them were asked questions, I think it was by our own Ian Dale. And they all prevaricated and went around the houses and were reluctant to give straight answers to straight questions in the manner of politicians, except for Jeremy Corbyn, who impressed me at the time by being somebody who actually answered questions. He didn't think what we would like to hear from him. He just said what he thought, which was quite refreshing. And he, at the time, was a popular choice, such that the membership of the Labour Party increased dramatically under his early leadership, and so did the amount of money that was coming into Labour. So what is it that has turned people off so much? Is it this camp other of the party's election leaders since 1945? What's happened in the meantime? Labour's proportion of the vote grew almost 10% in the general election, which you remember was called by Theresa May in a desperate attempt to shore up her position, which didn't work. It saw the Conservative Party lose its majority. It was the biggest swing to Labour since after the Second World War. So what's happened in the meantime? Why is Jeremy Corbyn so poisonous to the British public? If you look at the policies that he actually espouses, most of them are things that people would actually vote for, unless they knew that it was Jeremy Corbyn that was saying it. So come on, why not Jeremy? I bet if I asked 100 people whether they think that his 10 pledges that formed the basis of the platform that they ran on the last election, whether they think that that they would agree with the pledges that the Labour Party put forward. I bet most people would. I mean, they don't seem to be crazy. Things like supporting the NHS, which is, of course, something that all political parties do, but I mean, most people would agree with that. I mean, the NHS is a socialist construct. Not all socialism is bad. In fact, much that is good about this society has come from the government, which is, by definition, socialist. We all pay in, and they spend the money to benefit all, or as many people as possible. I mean, that's what socialism is, isn't it? Full employment and an economy that works for all. Well, who could argue with that? That was one of his 10 pledges. A secure homes guarantee. Well, who doesn't want that? Security at work, stronger employment works, and 0 hours contracts, collective bargaining rights, all these sort of things that gain the workers benefits that they would not ordinarily be given if they weren't wrested from the people with the ownership of the means of production. I mean, if it wasn't for trade unions, we'd all be working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. He suggests trade unions should organise so that working people have a real voice at work. Well, who, apart from the people that own those businesses, would vote against that? He wants a national education service open to all. Well, who doesn't want universal public childcare or universal education up to an excellent standard? I mean, why would you vote against that? All these things seem to be perfectly reasonable, don't they? So is it just a personality that people are turned off by? Do you just not like his beard? What is it? 034 or as the constant barrage of negative publicity that's come from the right-wing press actually turned people off by. Do you just not like his beard. What is it? 0344, or as the constant barrage of negative publicity that's come from the right-wing press actually turned people off him. What I do find notable is that when you almost feel as though you're being subject to a propaganda campaign against him, and you start to feel negatively towards him because you keep reading how what a nut this guy is and ridiculous policies that he backs him, and then you hear him speak and you think, well, this doesn't sound so crazy. It sounds perfectly reasonable much of the time. So what is it that has turned people off so much? If we can take racism out, if we can just assume that the Conservative Party is as racist as the Labour Party, be that not racist at all or very racist indeed, let's assume that that's a constant and we'll take that out. Is it just a personality thing? Do you just not like the look of him? 0345 6060 973. Sean in Horsham. This says Corbyn is too honest. That's why he's not electable. Well, that's what impressed me about him when he was vying to be leader when he came to our studios. And there were 4 of them around the table, as I said, and the only person who actually answered the question was him. So maybe that's it. Maybe he's not politician enough. Enfield. Hello, Daniel. 0345 6060 973. We're talking about Jeremy Corbyn's popularity or lack of. Fletch says the right-wing media have done a fantastic job of brainwashing, many of whom should be natural Labour voters. The right-wing don't want Corbyn, as he'd make the rich pay their proper taxes and close loopholes. Sadly, many have fallen for the smear campaign. Well, I think there's something in that. I think that part of the reason why the right-wing press have been so against Jeremy Corbyn is one thing that he said before he became the leader of the Labour Party, and that was that he would look into the lack of multiplicity in ownership of news outlets. In other words, they're too concentrated. And I think that freaked certain media barons right out, and they've been gunning for him ever since. What's extraordinary is actually the combined might of the right-wing press have failed to really put a dent in him. He's still there. I mean, I know this poll did suggest that if anybody other than Jeremy Corbyn... Carnforth. Hello, Annie.
Hello, Nick.
Annie.
I mean, I think you're completely right about the right-wing media. I think that's the first thing. The right-wing media have just gone for Jeremy Corbyn in a manner that I've never seen in my lifetime any politician be attacked so relentlessly and constantly in ridiculous ways, even to, things like saying he was a Czech spy, which was obviously disproved, and just ludicrous things. But, there are people out there who actually do believe everything they read in the newspaper. And papers like the Mail and the Express and the Sun, it's just absolutely every day there's something negative about Jeremy Corbyn. So, I mean, that's been going on and on and on. And then, also, I mean, I think the reason why Labour didn't win the election in 2017 was because of the right wing of the Labour Party, because just before the EU referendum, Labour were in front in the polls and they were doing quite well. And then just after the EU referendum, when they had that ridiculous coup and they were resigning, his cabinet ministers were resigning on the hour to try and bully him out of his office. That people don't like that. People in general don't like split parties, and I think that's one of the things that people really don't like. The fact that constantly some of the right-wing members of the party have been... it's hardly ever stopped. It did stop, actually, during the 2017 election campaign. Then most of them shut up, except for Stephen Kinnock, actually. But then, since then, again, it's all started again. And then, with this 9 lot walking out, people just really don't like that, and I think it puts people off.
Well, it does seem logical that there seems to be, the Lib Dems notwithstanding, there does seem to be a gap in the market for a centrist party, which used to be where Labour was, but that's not what Labour was traditionally. It seems more likely to me that Labour is what people consider historically to be a Labour party under Jeremy Corbyn than it used to be under Tony Blair, for instance.
Yeah, I don't think people wanted that anymore. I think people are absolutely sick of it. I mean, that's why, in the election, I think that Labour went from so far behind to almost, certainly taking them a majority off Theresa May, but almost winning, because people, when they actually heard about what the policies was, rather than the kind of lunacy that you hear in the press all the time, and also the media like TV and radio had to be, were supposed to be impartial during the election, and they did make an effort, some of them. And I must say LBC I thought was pretty good at that, better than some of the BBC radio stations. So, you got a more fair coverage during that election campaign, and all the people who've been stabbing him in the back constantly on the right wing of the party shut up temporarily because they were worried about losing their own seats. But since then, there's just been a hardcore rump of them who've never stopped. And then, with this happening this week, I just think it puts people right off.
Well, it is sort of understandable, isn't it? The people who joined the Labour Party under Tony Blair and were drawn to his vision of what the Labour Party should be do feel a bit discombobulated by this sort of new, to them, it's a new direction. This is not what they signed up for. But that's not, to me, what the Labour Party is historically about. They're not really about the middle class, which is what it seemed to be under Tony Blair. They're supposed to be about the working class. And so I sort of understand that this is not really what they felt they joined, but it is more like what the Labour Party should actually be, isn't it?
It's more like the Labour Party started off as and was traditionally, and then Tony Blair just turned the Labour Party into Tory-like, really. And because there's all this stuff about, Labour having been infiltrated by all these terrible lefty people, and yet I always feel that the Labour Party was infiltrated by people like Tony Blair, who took it over, turned it into something else completely, and all right, he was successful, with the first election particularly, but actually each election he lost more voters, and he lost a lot of the traditional working class voters who weren't particularly, in places like the North and the Midlands. And
now you can barely say his name in polite society.
No, absolutely. But you see, the problem is a lot of the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs, a lot of them are Blairites, and because Blair kept people on the left out, they used to parachute people in to be candidates that Blair approved of. I mean, he got complete control of the party.
I mean, in a sense, it does make perfect sense. And in fact, it wouldn't make sense at all if those people that now feel discomforted by the direction that Jeremy Corbyn is going in were to stay, because that's not the party that they had joined. That's not who they are. And so it makes sense that there is a churn, and that some of the people who are more centrist would go and become members of a more centrist party. But surely there is a position on the left for the Labour Party, which is what Jeremy Corbyn seems to represent.
Definitely, and personally I think those really hardcore ones, of maybe 20 or 30 of them, that just do not, they'd rather that Labour lost the next election. I think that's what they're up to. They're, those ones that have left. I think they're all thinking of sitting in those seats, which I think is quite immoral, because they've been elected as Labour candidates. MPs, people don't just elect their MPs.
I agree. I was making this point yesterday.
It's policies. It was that Labour manifesto that people like.
People vote for